These are the jokes, that's the things that they are still programming. This guy's more like actually
Bueno, yo voy a dar no como algo que se queda solamente en San Francisco y en Estados Unidos, tema del aborto con mucha fuerza aquí en Estados Unidos, pero se expande a todo el mundo. También por favor de la noche para que pues este crimen no llegue un horario más bien la esperanza se extienda. Entonces quiero reconocer esta lucha que se hace aquí en San Francisco, porque si aquí en San Francisco, que es la falta de violencia, ¿no? Como le dicen, y hasta nos lo hacen saber, la importancia de mantenernos firmes en esta lucha recae no solamente como personas, sino como seres humanos. Entonces, pues nada, nos vemos en la marcha por la vida en California en Sacramento.
I don't think West Virginia's ready for what's about to happen next.
You can't discuss abortion without discussing pregnancy. And so I want to cover the stages of pregnancy as well as complications involved with pregnancy and some arguments, common arguments, around the issue of abortion that involve pregnancy. With this, this is still me trying to figure out where exactly I stand on the issue. I have made up no decision. If you've seen the legal piece, you know that I think legally it's on shaky ground, but that's not necessarily a decision one way or another. I'm going to preference all of this by saying I am by no means a medical professional in this area. If you have watched my stuff, you might have seen me mention that I have some experience in the veterinary medicine field. So, you know, if we were talking cats, I might have a little bit more of a claim to fame. But this is by no means medical advice, nor anything you should use to cite in like a college paper. Although the research for this part was extensive and kind of fun. Honestly, there's some pretty cool information in this that I just think, whether or not this is the abortion argument, there's some pretty cool information that is very, very dope. Devoid of, separate from the argument. It's very dope. So without further ado, let's get into the first stage of development, the germinal stage, which begins at conception and goes for a few weeks. It really does not last that long. Here's the definition of that stage. I'm not going to sit here and read it. There's other stuff I want to cover a little bit more in-depthly than necessarily the definitions of the stages. Starting with fertilization. This picture, for some reason, says 2 weeks. Obviously, fertilization happens at the moment of conception. If I remember correctly, part of that 2 weeks is they are talking about the menstrual cycle and the ovulation period. We're not going to talk about that. But that is why it says 2 weeks fertilization instead of conception fertilization. Like that is the difference. That is why there is a difference. And yeah, it threw me when I first saw it. I was like, what are they? And then I read and I was like, oh, okay. So once we've gone past the germinal stage, we have the embryonic stage. And this begins at about the 3rd week. And at this point, from this point on, we're talking an embryo. If you don't know what an embryo is, I can't help you. An embryo is, we're talking an embryo. Like, there's a difference between germinal stage, which is cells developing and multiplying, and then an embryo is, it's more of a solid being, I guess. That's the best I can do to help you with that. Go watch Jurassic Park. Shameless plug for my favorite movie. So here is implantation. And so this is a bunch of cells. It's essentially when the fetus says, "Hi, I'm going to go from where it starts into the womb," and it implants itself to begin developing. At 5 weeks, we have heart development. So it has a little blump blump at 5 weeks, which this picture is actually insane. We all looked like that at some point. That's kind of weird. And then at 6 weeks, we look like a little dinosaur. Rawr. But our intestines begin to form. So this is a picture of a model of a fetus at 6 weeks. And in this picture model, it supposedly has intestines. And then we next have our 7 week stage. And I think this is kind of funny. We start developing limbs at 7 weeks. I don't know if you could call those limbs, but that's what they are. They are supposed to be limbs. And so we develop those at about 7 weeks. And then we enter the fetal stage. And this is where you hear people refer to a fetus. This is after the embryo stage. This is more of a formed organism, I guess you could say. And this goes for any creature. Here's the full definition. Cool. At 11 weeks, we start hiccuping, which is gotta be an experience for the mother. What does a baby do to stop hiccups? You can't scare it. Like, what does a baby... Okay. Anyways, after 11 weeks, we enter the second trimester of pregnancy. The fetus grows rapidly during this stage, and it's much less likely that you miscarriage during the second trimester. So basically, the fetus becomes much more viable once we enter the second trimester. A lower risk of miscarriage. And symptoms like morning sickness and fatigue are starting to sort of fade away from early pregnancy. I can't speak to that. Personally, there's probably going to be some mothers who are like, no, it lasted the whole thing. At 14 weeks, the brain impulses and facial movement begin, which is... Okay. 14 weeks, brain start firing, it starts making faces. So, there's just a thing, the bambino in the oven, making faces. I'm sorry, it's funny. And then at 17 weeks, bones begin to form. So at 17 weeks, it's getting some bones. There's some musculoskeletal stuff going on. At 19 weeks, it starts developing senses, and that's going to be your touch, your taste, your smell, your sight, your hearing. Those are your senses. We all remember them from primary school. Cool. So at 19 weeks, we start developing senses. At 23 weeks, those senses start becoming sensory memories. And these are just things that we remember from the environment. These mostly involve sounds, not really smells or anything like that, but this is a lot of sound-based stuff with fetuses. But sensory memories are just memories that we have from our environment, from information we picked up using one of our senses. Now after that point, we enter the third trimester. I'll take up a lot of room. It's a big bambino at this point. Trying to see what applies to this, because it's talking about it's so big it's pinching nerves in your hips, which has to be... And it does they do suggest that at this point you sign up for childbirth classes, but that doesn't really help us with the abortion argument. Or does it? Who knows? We'll see. So at 28 weeks, the baby has developed eyesight. It can feel. And there's a difference. Close your eyes for me real quick. Can you see light? Yeah, see, that's still sight senses because you can see light behind your eyes. Eyesight is the of color. However, I don't know necessarily how far that applies to these guys. But yeah, eyesight, like full on, it can see you at 28 weeks. So cute. It looks like an actual human at 35 weeks when it gets kidneys. Hopefully it doesn't have a twin, because at this point I guess its twin could hit it in the kidneys and... Ew. Okay, so at 39 weeks, we're done. We are turning full term, is the saying. It's considered full term. Yeah, that's about it. And then after that, you go into labor and delivery, which, cool, that's going to be about 41 weeks for labor and delivery. And, suddenly you have a little bundle of joy. And those are the stages of pregnancy. Obviously, this isn't every stage. That list would have been exhaustive. We've already been here for, 5 minutes talking about this? Yeah, that we would have been here for 20 if I'd gone through every single detail that occurs in pregnancy. But I did pick the coolest ones. But yeah, we have bones before we have eyes, which is interesting. We have intestines before we've got bones. A heart. One of the first things we get is a heart. It's kind of cool. So, we've now addressed how this thing grows, but what exactly genetically is this thing growing inside of you? What is a baby when it comes to genes? Is it something completely new? Is it a mix of different things? And so we're going to talk about that real quick. Here is a picture of all of our chromosomes. So you get 23 pairs, which is 46 chromosomes in total. One full set from each parent. So one full set of 23 from each parent. So if you look like, just take one from each of these, and that's one parent. What's really interesting, I find, is that 22 of these sets are normally identical, but then one set is going to be different. And that's going to be your sex-determining chromosome. So your XX or XY. Obviously, and I've talked about this in my LGBTQ video, intersex people exist, and that is a mutation of those chromosomes resulting in a combination of variables. So XY, XYX. I'm not even going to try. I don't even remember most of them off the top of my head, I'm not going to lie. Due to this, this is actually interesting. Due to this, males are going to inherit more chromosomal DNA than females from their mother, because the X chromosome is going to be larger than the Y chromosome. So there's going to be more of that female DNA than that male DNA, so more of their mom's DNA than their dad's DNA if you're a dude. So you really are a mama's boy, because you are more your mama than your daddy. Mitochondria DNA genome also comes from your mother's DNA. You develop that during fetal development. We each at conception take approximately 50% of our parents' DNA, meaning that at conception, we become a unique human being made up of completely new DNA. So if you think about it, for simplification facts, we'll say Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve each had perfectly original DNA. Their kids each had 50% of that. The kid and kid each had 50% of that. The kid and kid 50%, 50%. You get what I'm getting at? And then they have all these 50% and all these 50%, and it's all these 50% and 50%. So no two sets of DNA can be the same. Except for so if twins have kids with twins, their kids are genetically siblings. That is the only time that's, but even then their DNA is different. So yeah, that's the DNA argument. It is a completely brand new set of DNA forming inside of you from the moment of conception, because from the moment of conception, those chromosomes get assigned and they all start lining up with each other, creating these new DNA sets, which is really cool. I mean, honestly, that's pretty dope. So I mentioned that there's some really cool shit I'm going to talk about. I will say, in this is kind of your disclaimer for the next little bit. We are going to be talking about miscarriage off and on, and so that I don't normally give trigger warnings, but there are certain things that I will, and this is one of those things because I know it's very painful and difficult to work through. So I am giving that warning that we are going to be discussing miscarriage during this conversation, this part of the conversation, and then we are going to have a full conversation about different dystocias and reasons for miscarriage and fetal death in birth. So I guess what I'm getting at is skip ahead. And if you do want to stay, and this is something you work with, I hope maybe some of this information actually might bring you solace. So first and foremost, there's been a large bit of debate about this because it's been not. It's very our understanding of this is very new. It's very infantile. Don't excuse the poor choice of words. No pun intended. But it's growing. It's developing. Now I am doing the pun on purpose. But essentially, the transfer and adoption of fetal cells and DNA to the mother is a phenomenon that we are learning more and more about. It's called chimerism, and it occurs through the placental lining. If you don't know what a chimera is, it's a beast from Greek mythology. Lion, goat, eagle, I think, right? Yeah, I used to be a huge mythology nerd, but lion, goat, eagle. Don't ask me the exact proportions. It's never something I was super a chimera. I'm more of a dragon guy. Much preferred it when they were giant beasts that were more reptilian than anything else. So yeah, at least for some diseases, chimerism can actually benefit the mother. So chimerism, the adoption of this fetal DNA from the baby to the mother, allows the mother to potentially live longer. I'm trying to think. Does it increase or decrease Alzheimer's? Yeah, it decreases Alzheimer's and the risk of autoimmune disease. Sorry, I'm reading my notes real quick. Reduces the risk of cancer. Essentially, these adoption of the fetal cells have major positive impacts on the mother's body over time. Now, there are some risks that come along with this. May increase the mother's risk for developing an autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis. So it can either, I guess, decrease or increase your risk for autoimmune disease. That seems like a catch-22, but that is not what catch-22 means. Anyways, so risks of developing an autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, later in life. The effects only found in DNA contain certain genetic variants that increased risk for the arthritis. So, layman terms, basically, chimerism, the adoption of the fetal DNA through the placental lining into the mother's system, and we're going to talk about how that works in a second, can increase risks for rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. The way I worded that, I realized might have been confusing. Preventing certain autoimmune disease, increasing the risk for this one, rheumatoid arthritis, but only if genetic markers are present in the fetal DNA. So, how can this even happen? You might be thinking to yourself, what? What do you mean my kid's DNA is just leaking into my system? Let's talk about it. So, there's these really cool things called stem cells. And essentially, stem cells do anything cells. They're like a catch-all cell. And this is very simplified, so if you're like a major biology guru, don't come at me. This is very simplified. And I'm going to try to read a word real quick. So fetal cells, just like stem cells, are pluripotent, which means they can grow into any kind of tissue that they need to. And so while the fetus is developing inside the mother's womb, the placenta, it acts as sort of a barrier. This is a very bad biology lesson, but the placenta acts as a barrier. And in the transfer of nutrients and resources, because there is a blood connection and stuff, these fetal cells, because fetal cells can be just like any other cell, like your blood cells running through your veins are loose. They're not necessarily attached. I know that sounds weird. Don't freak out. But basically, in the transfer of this nutrients and the information between mother and baby through blood and all sorts of other things, these fetal cells can come into the mother's system. Then they go through the body and they attach themselves to certain places throughout the body. And because they're these pluripotent cells, because they are pluripotent, they can then basically shape themselves into wherever they attach themselves. So let's give an example. A fetal cell comes through the placental barrier, enters your system, and goes into your leg. Goes into your leg and makes a home in your thigh. It's then going to become the same as the cells around it in your thigh where it makes that home, whether that's the muscles of your thigh, the connective tissue, the bone. It's going to reassign itself into that. There is no full understanding as to why this happens, we do believe it has evolutionary benefits to rejuvenize the mother. A lot of moms do talk about feeling as if they've kept their child with them for their, post-pregnancy, past pregnancy, and this is why. When these cells reassign themselves, they don't magically take on your DNA, they are still your child's DNA. And so the reason I say we're going to talk about miscarriage is that means every mother has a very likely chance of having the DNA of every fetus that they've ever had in their womb. And that does include babies that are aborted. So with this, if you've had a miscarriage, your miscarried child's DNA could potentially be inside your body still. And that is a very large margin of occurrence. So it's a very good chance that your miscarried child's DNA is inside of you. Same with your aborted child, same with the child that you gave birth to. Interestingly enough, younger siblings can also experience the phenomenon on a very much so rarer scale. This is very rare, but younger siblings do have a potential chance of developing this genetic chimerism with their older siblings' DNA. And as for twins, they can also have twins have actually a very high chance of, because they are together in the womb, they have a very high chance of experiencing this. So the saying that twins might be connected actually might be more true than we've ever realized, because one twin could have the DNA of the other twin in it and vice versa. Cool, terrifying, do with that information what you will. That does mean if you have an older sibling and you're watching this, you might have their DNA inside of you. That sounded really, really creepy, but you get what I'm getting at. And this is all through the placental barrier. Chimerism via cross-placental is actually something that all mammals experience, too. Just throwing that out there. So this isn't just humans. All mammals can experience this. But yeah, every mother has a very, very high chance of having the DNA of all of their children inside of her. And it serves to rebuild and repair the mother's body. Next, we're going to talk about dystocia. What is dystocia? Dystocia just means difficult birth. So we're going to talk about a few different types of labor dystocia. And the reason I want to cover these is to sort of, because this also includes certain versions of miscarriage. The reason I want to cover these is because there is concession around the fact that there's belief around the fact that having a miscarriage would be made illegal if abortion's banned, or losing a child due to a non-viable pregnancy or dystocia would be made illegal if it's banned. When the pre-Roe v. Wade era, when that was in place, these things were still illegal. Were still legal, sorry. It was perfectly legal to miscarry your child, because what are you going to do to stop that? You can't stop that. And it was perfectly legal to have a child die due to dystocia, because again, what are you going to do to stop that? You can't stop. That is a medical emergency. That is a medical occurrence. And there's been no talk of making those things illegal. Miscarriages would still be not okay. When I say perfectly legal, I mean you're not going to go to jail for it, because it's not a crime. I don't think there's a law in the books that say you're allowed to do it, because that would be insane also. So I have noticed that a bit in the abortion argument, but we're going to talk about different things that could fall underneath this. So, first up, how common is this occurrence? Just to get that out of the way, it's apparently difficult to determine this. The exact incident of labor dystocia, due to a wide variety of definitions, it's believed that dystocia is responsible for the majority of cesarean deliveries. Dystocia accounts for between 25 and 55% of cesarean deliveries. And if you don't know what that is, that's a C-section where they have to cut into the mother's womb and remove the child that way. I'm trying to remember, was I cesarean? I think I was. It's probably a thing I should know about myself. First up on the chopping block. There we go. Shoulders. Sorry, I was trying to find the notes. Don't come at me. Sorry for the pause. Shoulder dystocia. Shoulder dystocia is a condition that happens when one or both of your baby's shoulders get stuck during vaginal delivery. There are no signs and no way to prevent this condition. Causes may include having a large baby, having a small pelvis, or being in the wrong position. Severe complications can occur, including nerve injuries to your baby. So this is one type of dystocia known as soda dystocia. There's a screen grab up about it. It's rare. It occurs in 0.6 to 1.4% of births, weighing between 5 and 8 ounces and 8 pound. Wait, what? Oh, sorry. Occurring in babies birthed, weighing between 5 pounds, 8 ounces, and 8 pounds, 13 ounces. I wish I could read like a normal person. I love reading. This is such going to be a tangent. I love reading. I read all the time. I struggle. Clearly. Especially with technology. I got a whole bunch of lights in my face. I get a little cross-eyed while filming these. But yeah. So sorry. Continuing. The rate increases to 5% to 9% of babies born weighing more than 8 pounds and 13 ounces. So between about 5 pounds and 8 pounds, it's rare. It's like 0.6 to 1.4. Over 8 pounds and 13 ounces, it jumps to 5 to 9% chance of this occurring. This is something that can be treated, and we're going to talk about treatment real quick. But yeah. All right, so treatment. Pre-signs, schedule C-section. So if you have these pre-signs, if they're like, hey, your baby's super big, they're going to schedule to cut you open. Just getting that out of the way, okay? So causes can be your baby being in the wrong position, your pelvic opening's too small, you're in a bad position. These all can be things that are causes of shoulder dystocia. And then the prognosis, by the age of 3 months, your baby's fine. Baby's fine. It's getting stuck. It's stuck. It can't come out. It's stuck. Like, unless there's a unless there's a loss and or lack of oxygen, there should be no permanent damage. Next, we're going to talk about an ectopic pregnancy. This is one you hear a lot that would be made illegal to have. I'm like, what? Just coming at this logically, that doesn't sound like a feasible argument, but okay. So basically, it's when the egg attaches it somewhere outside of the uterus, usually inside the fallopian tubes. That's the definition. Fertilized egg can't survive, and the growing tissue may cause life-threatening bleeding if left untreated. See, life-threatening bleeding, it can't survive. Like, that's not an abortion. That is a miscarriage. That is a non-viable pregnancy and needs to be dealt with surgical intervention. That's not an abortion. I feel sometimes like I'm talking to... Sorry, I've been collecting comments, and we're going to go through these from both pro-life and pro-choice people. And some of the things that y'all say on both sides is just zany. Sometimes ectopic pregnancies occur in other areas of the body, such as the ovary, abdominal cavity, or the lower part of the uterus, so the cervix. All of these are threatening. They all can cause bleeding. Prevention, there's no way to prevent it. Like, there's no way to prevent an ectopic pregnancy. It's just going to happen. And then treatment, essentially, okay, so it can be caused by traumatized or malformed reproductive organs. But also, so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you, because hormonal imbalances can also cause this, which a hormonal imbalance can be something as simple as stress. That's what that is. So yeah, there's nothing necessarily wrong with you if this is what happens to you. Wouldn't be made illegal. Treatment-wise, surgical intervention. Next up is a chemical pregnancy. A chemical pregnancy is going to be a pregnancy loss that happens before the 5th week. Testing positive on a pregnancy test only to get a negative result a few weeks later can signal a chemical pregnancy. Some people aren't aware they had a chemical pregnancy. Most people who experience them go on to have healthy pregnancies. Basically, what it is it's a pregnancy that just goes non-viable very quickly. And so you do test positive for being pregnant, and then you test negative. Happens, and and it's actually very common. About 25% of all pregnancies end in the first 20 weeks, and about 80% of those miscarriages happen early. It can be hard to know just how common chemical pregnancies are, though. Many people likely miscarry early without ever receiving a diagnosis or knowing they're pregnant. So it's a huge chunk of early miscarriages, and it's a chance you don't even know it happens. But like I said earlier, it's not like that baby's gone forever, because potentially its DNA is inside of the mother. Blighted ovum. This just sounded traumatizing when I started looking into this. A blighted ovum, or I'm not even gonna try that, is when a fertilized egg implants in your uterine lining but doesn't grow into an embryo. The gestational sac and placenta will grow, but an embryo doesn't grow, so the gestational sac stays empty. It causes a miscarriage in the first trimester of pregnancy. The reason I say this sounds traumatizing is because you've hit the first trimester. It causes a miscarriage within the first trimester. You feel like you're pregnant. There is a thing inside of you, but it's an empty sac. I don't know. It just does not sound. Maybe let me show you the picture. This is a picture of a blighted ovum. It's the result of chromosomal problems. Essentially, during cellular division, things just go wrong, and you don't end up with a fetus. You just end up with a sac. I don't know. If there's for some reason about this, this is the only one of these that really just made me go, ooh. I don't know why. I wish I could tell you why. I don't know why. So a molar pregnancy, and this is our last one. A molar pregnancy is a rare complication of pregnancy. It involves unusual growth of cells called trophoblast. These cells are typically become the organ that feeds the growing fetus. The organ is known as the placenta. There are two types of molar pregnancies: complete molar pregnancy and partial. In a complete molar pregnancy, the placenta tissue swells and appears to form fluid-filled cysts. Okay. There is no fetus. In particular molar pregnancy, the placenta might have both regular and irregular tissue. There may be a fetus, but the fetus can't survive. The fetus usually is miscarried in the pregnancy. A molar pregnancy can have serious complications, including rare forms of cancer. A molar pregnancy requires early treatment. All this is on the screen, but I wanted to read it to you anyways. Yeah, that sounds just as traumatizing as a blighted ovum. I do. It's generally caused by, again, chromosomal issues, things with the vision not going right. I don't know how else to put that, but basically, yeah. Those chromosomes are pretty damn important, it sounds. Kind of need all of them. Was that an ableist comment? I didn't mean it that way. Oh my gosh. I just realized how that probably sounded. I did not mean that way. Moving on. So that's a handful. I don't think it's all. I think there's some that I did miss, but that is a handful of the forms of miscarriages and dystocia that you can experience. Now, the fact that I even have to talk about this is kind of peeing me off, because I can understand a little bit of the other arguments made, but one argument in my research that I found, and this didn't come from any comments or anything, is that a fetus is a parasite. A fetus is a parasite. That seems a little rude, don't you think? But we are going to see if it has legitimacy. Could a fetus legitimately be classified as a parasite? We're going to talk about it. So, what is a parasite? Parasites are organs that depend on the host to survive and spread, with three main types. And we're going to get into each of those types, but you've got your ectoparasites, your helminths, and then your protozoa. They were basically, a parasite is an organism that lives in and requires another organism to reproduce. Gross. I don't like parasites. What do parasites do to your body? They feed, grow, multiply in ways that harm your body. Whatever. So, ectoparasites. Those are going to be things like fleas, lice, crabs, ticks. Here's an example of a tick, an ectoparasite. Mites are also ectoparasites. I'm trying to think. Did I miss any? No, I think, yeah, I did miss. There's a few, like, I think bodfly larvae. If you don't know, they'll, like, embed in your skin. It's terrifying. If you have a strong stomach, look it up. I won't be showing a picture. But yeah, those are ectoparasites. Your helminths, better known as worms, your flukes, your tapeworms, hookworms, or bloodworms. Yeah, bloodworms are helminths. But yeah, and then your protozoa. That's going to be amoebas, ciliates, flagellates, and sporozoas. Most of the ones you hear about are amoebas. And that's what these are. These are brain-eating amoebas. That's what this picture's of. Like a little munch on your brain. Some of y'all, I think that might already happen to reading some of these replies I've been getting. And then more on, like, diving deeper into whether or not a fetus is a parasite. So the full-on biological definition of parasitism, which is the being afflicted, it's the condition of being afflicted with parasites, is right here. I'll shut up. Y'all can read it. I'm tired of reading things. All right, we ready? Cool. Based off this definition, I don't... It goes in and it changes things in an unnatural or an irregular way to the host system. Pregnancy is a natural occurring thing that is like, it's designed for a woman to get, like, that is the whole point of the woman's reproductive system. It's designed to do that. Our bodies, while they can host a parasite, is not designed to host a parasite. That's why we get sick from it. A mother can, due to complications, get sick from pregnancy, but regularly the common is not that case. And then further, this is proved with how the resources are distributed between a mother and a fetus. Here's an excerpt on how that works. Again, I'll shut up and let you read. Cool. It's an evolutionary process. She is designed to allocate resources to the fetus. This isn't some random parasite coming in. It's just, I don't understand. And it's the same species. That's another thing. Parasites are generally a different species. Guys, it's not holding water. It really isn't. Here's more on how that works. You can pause the video to read, because I'm moving on. The next thing is going to be discussing stages of cognitive development. This has a lot to do more with when they're out of the womb, but there's essentially an argument that, like, it can't live independently, yada yada. Spermatitus, can a child, like a 2-year-old, live independently of their mother cognitively? Because we're going to see if there's a legitimate, like, is there actually an independent living difference between being in the womb and out the womb? Or is it just that the resources being allocated to the child come externally or internally from the mother? Oh, and to answer the question, no, a fetus is not a parasite. A fetus is not a parasite. You're weird. Anyways. So, the sensorimotor. That's embarrassing. The sensory motor stages of cognitive development. So birth to 2 years, knowing the world through movement and sensations, learning the world through basic actions such as sucking, grasping, looking, and listening. Learn that things continue to exist even when they cannot be seen. Object permanence. This develops more towards the 1.5 2 year point. Realizing they are separate beings from people and objects around them, again, occurs to the 1.5 to 2 year point. Realizing that their actions cause things to happen between the world, 2 year point. I have more excerpts that I'll put up while I'm talking, and you can pause to read them, but we're gonna quickly run through this because I feel like this one's self-explanatory. No, a 2-year-old can't take care of itself. It doesn't even know that objects are permanent, really. It doesn't realize it's a separate organism. Like, the only difference I can see based off that definition, and I've already read all these other excerpts that are popping up. Yes, it's rapid, but the only difference in that resource allocation, particularly at the beginning, that for that first like 6 to 9 months after birth, yeah, the only difference is that the resource allocation is not coming from inside the mother to the fetus. Now it's coming from the mother's external actions towards the infant. That's the difference. That's the difference. I would say, since we've talked about this, germinal, embryo, fetus, infant, toddler, whatever other terms, baby, these are all just words. And yeah, they kind of have definitions. I don't think for a second that being at a different stage makes a fetus any more illegitimate. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So, the final thing I want to address on this rough biology lesson that you're getting. Although, I don't know, is it that rough? Let me know in the comments. Is this a really rough biology lesson, or am I eating a little bit? How does pregnancy happen? Since there seems to be a little bit of discourse that a fetus, like, it feels like some of these arguments that I've heard, that they feel like a fetus just spawns in. So we're going to talk about pregnancy happens. Obviously, in discussing this is a little bit more poke funny. This is a very poke funny segment part of this whole video. And I do know that there are some serious implications, which is our next segment, actually. So we're gonna discuss how you get pregnant. Ready. A penis is put in a vagina. Sperm meets egg after orgasm and ejaculation, and the egg is fertilized by the spermatozoa. Done. Okay, I'm being a dick. So here's an excerpt from Planned Parenthood. How can you have a healthy sex life? And I want to point out, where is it? Safe sex. There we go. Safe sex. I don't know why that took me so long to find. But safe sex, getting tested for ADVs and preventing unwanted pregnancies. Do you know what they're talking about? Condoms. Birth control. But mainly condoms. Wrap it in latex or she gets your paychecks. I'm an asshole. How do people get pregnant? I like how Planned Parenthood says it's actually very complicated. It's not. Teenagers do it in the back of their dad's car at the movie theater. Drive-in movie theater, I should say. Is that even a thing anymore? Probably isn't. Which is kind of... I would say saying it's kind of sad, it's kind of fucked up, but, like, obviously teenagers are still having sex, so, like, it's sad because of the loss of a retro thing, but, like, teenagers shouldn't be having sex because they don't have the emotional maturity to deal with it. And this, of course, gives a little bit more of a detailed explanation of how that occurs. Sperm meets egg. That's how you get pregnant, and you can only get pregnant through sex. Now, there is the difference between consensual and non-consensual sex, obviously, and I'm not saying in the non-consensual standing that making these comments about birth control are relevant. However, we are going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. But yeah. At this point, I can say with pretty much decent certainty that a fetus is definitely a separate organism from the mother, and that is a fully natural process. It is not a parasite. It isn't something that just randomly occurs. It's separate. It's actually really kind of cute. It's separate. It is a living organism. And the only real difference between before it's born and after it's born is internal via external resource allocation. I don't know. Give your thoughts in the comments. Gives a lot for me to mull over and think about while we're talking about the rest of this. Next up, we're going to be discussing the what are called exceptions, the exceptions policy. And these are essentially things that are held as should be made exceptions to abortion restrictions. As in, you should still be able to get an abortion if these things occur, even if abortion is banned. So we're going to talk about those because I don't think I can give an actual opinion on abortion without being able to address whether or not I think exceptions are legitimate. So, yeah, time for the next segment, I guess, and I will go see y'all there. I encourage all of you to go check out the rest of the videos that precursored this. This is the third video in the abortion series, or just stick around and wait for the final product to be produced. Further, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you for watching, loves, and I will see y'all in the next one. Also, if you want to see more of my lovely face and hear more of me running my mouth, I do a lot of short form content on TikTok and Instagram.